Good morning or good evening, depending where you are. I'd just like to welcome you all to the presentation on using MQ-Precise, or MV-Precise, I should say, to automatically generate diagrams out of message record code. So I've just got up here, hopefully you can all see, is just a little bit of an agenda. First off, as I said, I'd like to say welcome. Thank you for giving up your time to join us. And I'm hoping that you'll get something out of this, even if it's not a product that you'd like to pursue, but hopefully still it gives you an opportunity to have a think about some of the items we're discussing. There is a chat available, so if you do have any questions, please feel free to type in any comments or questions, and I'll stop periodically just to check that chat. But if not, we'll get to the end, and there will be a Q&A session. So we'll get started. So just a quick run through of the rationale of what we're trying to do. So as a message broker developer, or I guess as any developer, it's often difficult to understand exactly what the code's doing. So message broker itself is a model-driven tool. So you draw the diagram, you attach the connections, you write some code, and you've got an application. So if we look at what message broker here, the IDE is providing us, we can see that we've got some flows. And we'll just jump into the demo one, for example. So we can see we've got some flows. So this flow is an executable block, and it tells us a little bit about what the code's trying to do. See here we've got a timer triggering an event that sends a message to a queue. The queue calls a SOAP calls out to a SOAP endpoint and sends an email, and looks like it also updates the database. So when we're looking at this code, we can go through the code. We'll go through the SQL, and we can see. Well, obviously, this is not a great example because it doesn't do anything, but we can see what this part of the program is trying to do, or this part of the runtime is trying to do, which is great for us as developers. But it's very limiting as far as sharing knowledge. If you want to go talk to the business about what the business process is, we take this diagram along. It's not going to mean a lot to them, and it doesn't mean a lot in the context of what the whole business process is. So what we're trying to do with with automatic generation of message broker code, is trying to bridge that gap between what we'll see in IDE and what is business knowledge about the system. So we're trying to get an overview of what the application is and the code base. So that's the first 2 points here: an overview of the entire code base and an understanding of the process and relationships and dependencies between the components, which is the diagramming part of the presentation. The other thing we're trying to achieve is producing shareable artifacts. So while message broker itself does have the ability to generate diagrams, the diagrams themselves have to be manually done, which is always an issue. So if you want to do all the diagrams, you have to manually go through every message flow. And each individual diagram is essentially just a screenshot of what the message flow is in the IDE. So you're not getting a lot of extra benefit. You're not improving the knowledge base of your developers, and you're not being able to interact with the business any differently. So what we want to do is have something that will automatically generate diagrams and automatically generate this knowledge and allow it to put it into our corporate knowledge tools such as Confluence or SharePoint or any of the number of proprietary wikis out there. By making it as automatic as possible, it means it will be kept a lot more up to date, because it doesn't require someone sitting and diagramming anything in particular. It'll keep it a lot more accurate and a lot less error prone. And also means if it's a lot more accurate and a lot more up to date, then it's more likely to be used by the business and more likely to be used by the developers. Now the other point here is a place for suggestions and helpers. So I don't know how many of you have had a chance to have a look at our Sonar plugin, but we'll just quickly jump over to it. So this is the Sonar dashboard that you would see when running Sonar, and these are the metrics issues, so the violations, and some other information that the MV-Precise plugin is creating for us. So it's giving us a list of files, giving us a list of number of nodes, giving us some measures of complexity, all sorts of very interesting metrics from a development or quality of code perspective. And you've probably seen violations before, but it tells us some things about our code that we might want to change. What we did find when developing this plugin is there are a lot of things that we'd like to be able to show through Sonar which aren't really compatible with the way Sonar works. So, for example, as part of one of our checks, we checked that the queue definitions for all the defined in the say the MQSI file. Let me just go see if I can find it. So we've check dashboard. So the queue definitions. Let me see if I can find a queue definition file. So our queue configs file. So one of the checks is we check that this queue definition file matches all the queues defined in all their message flows. So when we've got a queue that's in our, which is defined here in our configuration file, which is in our message flow, it could suggest that we've forgotten something, we've mistyped something. Also, if we've got a queue which is defined in our message flow, which isn't listed here in our queue configuration, it also means that we haven't captured our runbook correctly for when we deploy to a new environment. So more than likely, when we go to our next environment, our flows aren't going to work because the queues aren't there. Or potentially, worst case, when we go to production, we'll have a production issue on the first day because the queues aren't there and the message flows don't work. So what we wanted somewhere to place these suggestions. We wanted some sort of holder or container for these. And a automatically generated diagram is a better place or better container for this than what Sonar is. Because, for example, what we could do is we could take that list of queues that are missing and we could develop or automatically create the list of queue definitions. Same with SQL. We might, as developers, want our DBAs to be involved within our analysis and design and tuning of our applications. So unless our DBAs want to go delve into ESQL and message flow code, ideally we want something that automatically generates all the SQL out. This is the feature we'll be developing, or is being developed and be available in one of the future releases. But we'd like to be able to produce all our SQL in one place so we could give it an easy representation or an easy viewable representation to our DBAs for them to troll through. So Sonar is not a good place for publishing that sort of information, but a wiki or a knowledge tool is, particularly if it's kept up to date and it's automatically generated. So that's what we mean by our place for suggestions. I'll just quickly pause for a second just to see if there are any questions. So I don't know if anyone has any questions. No, we'll keep going on, just because we don't want to waste your time. So that's the overview. So we'll quickly jump into the demonstration. So what we have here is we've got Sonar running in the background. I'm just going to run an analysis over the code. So what this diagramming tool is based on the back of the Sonar plugin. One, because we're doing the heavy lifting with Sonar anyway. Two is because it already provides a enterprise level environment for analyzing code, and also provides a good infrastructure for integrating with continuous integration. So you can run your Jenkins jobs. Your Jenkins job can run your build and deployment. On the back of that, it can run Sonar, and at the end of the Sonar, we can automatically generate our diagrams. So we can end up with diagrams being updated essentially whenever we decide we need to rebuild our software. So that's we've just run that. So we just see that our date time is updated in our diagram. So we'll jump into the diagram. And this is the crux of the presentation. It's giving us an overview of our message flows. So the first part of this page we can see is a whole bunch of lines and boxes. Now each one of these boxes represents our message flow. Each one of these lines represents an integration or dependency between the message flows. And that's the first part. The second part is the summary of the application, the overall architectural view or additional architectural view. And this here is just a summary of all the, for example, all the flows. So we can see here, it gives us a list of all the flows in the application with the summary of the comments. So that we've done. So we've got this for flows, we've got this for queues, we've got this for data sources, properties, Java methods, stored procedures, monitoring events, file inputs and file outputs, and we will be looking to extend this to all sorts of nodes, input and output nodes. So including email in, email out, SOAP, and HTTP, and potentially TCP nodes. Now the reason for this is even between our message flows, we might have dependencies between SOAP consumers and SOAP producers. So we would like that extra information. We'd like to have all that information up here in our dependency model. So we'll just dive into our dependencies. So as simple as either clicking on a dependency, and we'll basically just show the inputs and the outputs. So we can just see from here, this is for this particular flow, our drawing for message flow. It has one input, Q, which is Q4, and Q4 is actually published by drawing 1. So we can see there's a dependency here, very simple dependency here on drawing 4 of drawing 1. So if we wanted to find out or track through a message, if we knew that it goes out of drawing 1, this diagramming tool helps us to see that it's actually going out where it's going to. In this case, drawing 4. So that's a fairly simple example. So we'll just look at maybe a couple more while we're here. So we can see here this particular flow has two output queues, drawing 5 and our log. So if we look at our log, let's go back to the main screen. Our log is a dependency of a lot of other flows. So a lot of our flows will be going to log. And one of the things we'll be including is the ability to tune the diagrams to include, or I should say, to exclude particular flows or particular queues because they're not potentially logging queues, for example. So we'll have some sort of layering to turn those on and off, just so it doesn't dirty the image with a whole lot of logging information. Or doesn't dirty the diagram with a whole lot of logging information. We'll just have a bit more of a dive around because there's a couple of interesting ones here. So we can see here both display calls and drawing D, both publish messages which are consumed by drawing A, and they end up going through to the flow called drawing B. Drawing B. Let me just. There's a couple of interesting ones that the diagram shows up, which are not obvious. So here's an interesting one. So this is interesting. This is telling us that we have an initial queue called start, and when we deposit a message in that, it triggers the display all message flow. Now, the interesting thing about this is it's telling us that there's actually two consumers from Q2. So drawing 2 and drawing 1 are both consumers of Q2 messages. Now, looking at this from an architectural perspective, this is most likely a design issue. We probably don't want two message flows consuming from the same queue because we end up with non-deterministic behavior. We don't know which one's going to consume it. We don't know what process flow is going to go through. So this is suggesting actually a possible flaw or issue with our application. So if we were looking at this diagram, we might want to go back to our code and have a look at what drawing 1 and drawing 2 are actually doing, whether they both need to consume the same queue. It may be legitimate, but it may not be. So that's an overview of the dependencies and interactions between message flows which we're capturing with the drawing tool. The other interesting or the other useful way of navigating around this, apart from clicking on a particular flow, as we've been doing, is to either find things by the queue, for example. So if we know that something is going to a particular queue, we can just type in the queue name, and it's not entirely it's not especially accurate when something like A, because A is not a queue name. A is a pretty common name, but if we have some other idea about what the flow is called, then we can narrow down our search and we can find our flow, and then we can go to our then we can go and have a look at the what the queue's doing, what the flow's doing. This also includes files as well, Java methods, procedures, and the interesting one, probably interesting one here is files. We can actually see if we know what's producing or consuming a file, then we can we know what file we're interested in. We can jump into the message file and have a look and see what it's doing, or work backwards from this diagramming tool and go back into our development environment. Oops. Okay. To try and find our flow, which isn't showing up, which is interesting. So there's additional navigation. And the last bit is this actual diagram itself here. So it's not having it embedded in a navigatable HTML page is quite useful, I believe. But the other thing you can do is from your web browser, we can just go to the diagram directly, which means we can also just print the diagram directly. I won't do it here because I don't have a printer attached, but yeah, and then we've got options to go and take this. Let me just see if I can shrink to one page. See if I can make it preferences. See if I can get it to shrink to one page. We want landscape. We want. Okay, yeah. So might need to export to PDF, but essentially, if we had a print, we can then print this out and take it to the business, or we can embed this in a document. Or we can blow it up and put it on the side of our petition, take it to meetings, various things we can do with it. Now we've got this information, which is a lot more easily consumable than what we get out of the IDE itself. So again, I'll just pause to see if there are any questions. Okay, I'll keep moving on then. I'll just go back to our agenda for a second. So that's a demonstration. So just a quick little discussion about the technology choices and some of the decisions we made. One of the early ones on was the question of static analysis or runtime analysis. So we've gone with the static analysis of code for a couple of reasons. One is we're doing a lot of the heavy lifting already as part of the development of the Sonar plugin. So it seemed more logical to continue on with using static analysis of the code to extract information and knowledge. The other thing is it's a lot easier to analyze the code without having a runtime environment, because you won't necessarily have a runtime environment for every, say, branch or tag that you might be looking at. So to get this information from a runtime environment production, you would need to connect up to a production environment, which is, well, A, is going to influence how your production runs because it's going to put a performance drain on it, and B, it's going to probably make security people quite anxious that you're taking a third-party tool and trying to connect up to a production environment. It also means that you need to have a fully fledged environment, so you need to build out a complete development environment with all the execution groups deployed and all the flows deployed into those execution groups to get the same logical model out. One of the other options we looked at was embedding within the IDE as a plugin, and we've also looked at as extending the Sonar's functionality itself to be run as an Eclipse plugin within Message Broker. But then again, you get the same drawback of you need to have all the code checked out. You need to have a consistent view of the code to be able to do that. By running all this off the back of a build server, it's a one setup process. So once that process is set up to do deployments, it's also automatically set up to do diagramming as well. So that's the technology decisions we took. So I mentioned early on about some of the some of the things we'd like to do. So I'll just have a bit of a rundown of the direction this tool is going to take. One of the things I was discussing was being able to see all the SQL. So being able to show a DBA, an easy interface for them to navigate through all the SQL and tie it back to a particular flow or SQL file, to then have a discussion with the developer about what SQL is doing. Now, if you don't use a lot of SQL, but you say use a lot of stored procedures, again, the same you get the same benefit of having all the stored procedures listed, which it already does. So then you can take that same list, or the DBA can take that same list of stored procedures developers and do reviews and whatnot on it. So it'll help as a sharing tool between different types of team members. Same with queues and deployment information. One of the checks we do have as part of the plugin as a convenience check for developers is it tells you when you haven't got your message flow included in a deployment descriptor or a deployment as part of a deployment build and task. So the next logical step for that is if we're telling a developer that they're missing the message flow from a deployment task, would be to automatically generate that deployment task for them and leave it in a convenient area for them to be able to see through this automate tool. That way, if they see that they have actually missed something, it might be just as simple as cutting and pasting that description out and dropping it into their build file, and then they've picked up their missing flows, or merging that information with the existing build file. Or potentially for completely new projects, we'll be looking to generate the entire build list for all the message flows required, and then it's just a matter of separating them out into the execution groups that you might want to deploy them to. I did touch on one of the issues at the moment, or one of the limitations at the moment, is the product only looks at MQ, input and output nodes. So we're looking to extend this to MQ gets in the middle of the flow. Also, all file entry points and exit points and how they tie together. So when one flow publishes a file that another flow consumes, we'll put that relationship up in the diagram so you can see it. And moving forward, those relationships, what we're looking to do. Oops, sorry, let me just go back to the page. So at the moment, to make it clear the relationships, we color code the we highlight the line. Moving forward, we'll be looking to move this to change this functionality so that not only is it highlighted in a different color when you to tell you the path of the dependency, we'll also look to change the color of the dependency to indicate the type it is. So black might be from MQ, blue will be, for example, file, red might be green might be soap flow. That way we can see that, and we give us extra information. We can see the type of information or the type of dependency. At the moment, the dependencies based on, or the queue-based dependencies are fairly simple. So just that message flow A sends a message to queue B, which is picked up by message flow B. Now, there's a lot more complexity that we're looking to build with this tool that handles publish-subscribe situations, and and other sort of queue combinations. So this will mean that we'll be able to see the more complex relationships between, say, publish and subscribe, or where our queue is defined as a queue itself is defined as a topic and a subscription, and also where we're looking to change the distribution list, for example, within the SQL that goes to a queue. In that case, we'll be able to, from a flow, determine or generate in the diagram all those possible paths to all those possible queues based on what the SQL is. Which is the distribution lists. So that's the presentation. I hope you've. I'll just see if anyone does actually have any questions. Now, if no one has any questions, I'll just leave the floor open for another minute. But if no one has any questions, we'll end it a little bit early and let everyone either get to bed or get on with their day. Okay, well, thanks you for joining me. I hope that you got something from this presentation, whether you decide to further investigate the plugin or not, or to further investigate Sonar or not. I still hope that you found it interesting at least, and you get take something away. And good morning or good evening to wherever you are, and we'll catch you again. Thank you.